Gallup poll indicates that more Americans are leaning to the right. As the election cycle heats up, 38% of Americans say they're conservative now on social issues versus just 33% last year and 30% in 2021. And the number of Americans saying they're liberal has actually gone down to 29% from 34% in each of the past 2 years. That is an interesting trend. Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill, with me. Julia, this is the highest percentage ever. I mean, I've met a lot of people who would say that they were fiscally conservative, but to be socially conservative is a totally different thing. So what exactly do we believe is driving this?
Yeah, hey, Adrienne, when I looked at this poll and I saw those numbers from 2021 and 2022, I think the first thing that popped into my mind was a result of the pandemic. Now, just to get maybe a little off track here, I covered the 2021 gubernatorial race just down the street in Virginia, and you saw now Governor Glenn Youngkin campaigning on a lot of issues that would be considered socially conservative. A lot of these issues are what he would frame as education, and you saw a lot. He did this because you saw during the pandemic a lot of Americans staying home with their kids and getting a front row seat to their education. Now, conservatives say that they, saw that a lot of their children were learning more liberal subjects in schools and being exposed to liberal content. And you saw Republicans very much take hold of that and use that in their messaging. So I think you're seeing sort of a result of how the pandemic has impacted views in America, but also a result of political messaging. We've really seen conservative groups, Republican groups really zero in on a lot of these issues in an effort to bring more voters into the fold. And this poll could be a result of those efforts.
And it's not just older people. I'm looking at the Gallup data, and since 2021, just 2 years ago, there have been double-digit increases in conservative social ideology between the ages of 30 and 64, those voters leaning more towards conservative social issues. Is this all kind of a balance, a counterbalance to some of the extremes we've been seeing on both the right and the left? What does this tell us about Democrats today?
Yeah, look, I think it could definitely be seen as a counterbalance. And this data from Gallup is interesting because when we look at the past election in 2022, we saw that Democrats performed much better than expected, especially given that it was President Biden's first-term election as an incumbent president, first-term midterm election, I should say. And what was interesting about that midterm election is that you saw that a driving issue for a number of voters, a lot of voters, particularly women voters between the ages of 30 and 65, was abortion access. That's obviously a socially conservative issue. So you saw a lot of these voters reacting to the news that Roe versus Wade was overturned, and they were voting for Democrats. So, I think even though, I'm not discounting this data from Gallup, but it would be really interesting to get into the differences in a number of these issues and how voters view different issues. I think voters are definitely more complex, if you will, than labeling them as socially conservative or socially liberal. I think it's a bit more nuanced.
Okay, well, there was a tick up in the number of independent voters. Those who identified as independent ticked up about 5 percentage points to 29%. Is that a game changer, especially as we approach 2024?
I think it certainly could be a game changer, and I think you're seeing an increasing frustration among Americans with this idea of a two-party system, especially when it comes to the prospect or the potential prospect of a Trump versus Biden rematch. Adrienne, it's interesting. Earlier this week, we saw that NewsNation Decision Desk HQ poll that came out that showed that 49% of Americans said they would be interested or they would be willing to vote for a third-party candidate if President Biden and President Trump were their party's nominees. So I think you're starting to see a growing frustration with the state of politics and the options that were given, and that uptick in independence further illustrates that.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.